reach that high level of success that you dreamed of, you may want to quit, but stick it out a little bit longer. Because really, I mean, Diamond Stud happened, and then I think you could say, Mike, you know dates and history better, but I would say about 2 or 3 years after Diamond Stud, he's a main event top guy wrestler.
Yeah, good point. I think Diamond Stud debuted, from my recollection, I believe it was Wrestle War 1991 in kind of a segment with DDP, and DDP was managing the Freebirds at the time, and he also had what he called the Road Boss. Sir Oliver Humperdinck was kind of the second manager for this troupe, and they did a little segment where they had Diamond Stud kind of come out. I think it's actually a little bit of controversy, because I think they accidentally did some swearing. I think DDP, like something happened with the camera or something, and DDP's caught on camera with some vulgarity, which is kind of one of those early, live aha moments on wrestling. And but yeah, Diamond Stud wrestled. He beat the Z-Man several times. He was the type of guy that was kind of winning matches against the likes of Johnny Gunn or the Z-Man. But once he got into the ring with a guy like, say a Sting, he was going to lose. So he was kind of a mid-card maniac in that period. And but the look was great. I mean, the Diamond Stud look was great. He was in great shape. It looked like he had lost maybe just about 10 pounds of bulk, but was kind of a more streamlined physique at that point. What was interesting, Tommy, was that Scott Hall, as Scott Hall, had just wrestled in WCW in 1989 and was kind of used really as an underneath babyface as Gator Scott Hall. He actually was at the 1989 Great American Bash in the 2-ring battle royal and didn't make much of an impression. And as a wrestling fan at that time, it was odd because Scott Hall in 1985, I think he had a Remco action figure from the AWA, which is probably worth $1 million right now. Him and Kurt Hennig were the AWA World Tag Team Champions. They beat Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Steve Regal, the team that had beaten the Road Warriors. So Scott Hall was also, you talked about how Scott was kind of probably the inspirational leader, if nothing else, of the clique. A lot of his professional mentorship came from none other than Kurt Hennig. And the time they spent together in the AWA, and Shawn Michaels was there as part of the Rockers. If any hardcore wrestling fans want to look up, I think it's called the Wrestle Rock Rumble, the rap song that Vern Gagne produced for Wrestle Rock 86. You could actually see Scott Hall, Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty, and Kurt Hennig like kind of hanging out on the streets of Minnesota or Las Vegas or somewhere. I think sometimes, Tommy, people kind of forget that Scott was like 12 years into his career when the NWO started. I mean, he had wrestled some in Puerto Rico. He had done a bunch of stuff. But I think,
not to cut you off, but I mean, even when Razor Ramon started, he was a vet. He was a veteran. He had probably 7 years under his belt.
Yeah, he started in 1984, and I was watching, and probably Tommy, from your suggestion, I rewatched the Scott Hall WWE Network special on Peacock, and on top of it, and that was about 50 minutes. I recommend that to folks if they want to get a brief overview of Scott's career. And then I watched from 1994, Gorilla Monsoon and Stan Lane host a kind of review of Razor Ramon's best matches. And it must have been one of those WWF VHS tapes.
Wow.
And so you've got a rarely seen match between Scott Hall and Yokozuna for the WWF title. There's Scott Hall in Providence, Rhode Island, where you and I have seen some good wrestling. And Scott Hall is defending the Intercontinental title against IRS, Mike Rotundo, who became Bray Wyatt's father, So just some interesting stuff. Let's talk about some personal favorite memories, Tommy, because like I said, I know you're a Click aficionado. I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what were some of your favorite Click moments or memories or just thoughts on those guys as a unit, those 5 guys?
Well, I think that the interesting thing about Razor Ramon, as a character, I'm going to do a little bit of Razor talk because, again, that's close to my kind of childhood wrestling connection. The bad guy, right? Right in the name alone, he's the bad guy. He comes down to the ring. He's oozing with machismo. He points his finger in the ring attendant there, and he says, "Hey, don't lose these chains. If you do, I'm going to beat your ass," or whatever he says to him. He's a bad guy. But what is he? He's also developed into a baby face. So my point that I'm making is, you could argue that long before Stone Cold Steve Austin was the tough guy, badass anti-hero, Scott Hall as Razor Ramon was truly one of the first guys to not be a traditional baby face, but get wildly over with the crowd. I
Right.
mean, again, coming down to the ring with a bunch of gold chains and pointing your finger at the guys saying, "I'm going to kick your ass if something happens to these, it's you." That's not
Yeah.
a traditional babyface thing to do. Yet there he is doing it. Everybody loves him. His promos, he's kind of a little rough around the edges, but he's a babyface. So again, not to go on this crazy rabbit hole, but you could argue that like Razor Ramon is one of the first characters that's truly an anti-hero. He he possesses qualities that a standard good guy doesn't.
Right.
Yet when the money's on the table, he's going to do the right thing. He'll come in and save the other baby face if they're in trouble. But he's not going to be all cute about it. He's not going to be a smile and baby face for you. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to look at. I'm not saying that he invented that concept, but you could say that he's one of the first kind of we'll call it non-traditional baby faces that got over.
And how great was that leading into when Razor and Diesel made the jump, of course, from WWF to WCW in '96, and Razor or Scott Hall was the first one to do so. And I'm going to share a little something, folks. I don't like to show vulnerability in my pro wrestling wisdom, but Tommy, I was never a wrestling observer type of guy. Like I kind of like being surprised by things as they developed. And I always thought that like the Observer or other newsletters like that were kind of cheating. So when Diamond Stud debuted in WCW in 1991, it didn't click to me that was Scott Hall. He did such a wonderful job, him and DDP, with the dyed black hair and the curly Q thing. And like I said, his physique looked like he was about 10 pounds lighter.
I was going to say, I think maybe even 25 pounds lighter. I mean,
Yeah.
Scott Hall in AWA was a fucking monster.
Yes.
Like he was a brick shithouse, and yeah, he developed more of like an athletic, still jacked up as all hell, but more of an athletic, streamlined physique indeed when he came to WCW.
Yeah, so I didn't recognize him, and so I was kind of watching Diamond Stud for that year, the 1991 into '92 year, just thinking this is a new wrestler, just some new guy. And then when Diamond Stud kind of got repackaged for the WWF as Razor Ramon, I was very much thinking, okay, this Razor Ramon is the Diamond Stud, and that's that. It wasn't until '96 when the reports came that, Razor and Diesel, but AKA Scott Hall and Kevin Nash are coming over to WCW. That's when it clicked, like at the end of The Usual Suspects, where I'm like, oh my God, this guy that I've been watching as Razor Ramon and Diamond Stud, that's the same guy from 10 years ago as Scott Hall. So I just wanted to say that because I'm a pretty informed wrestling fan, and he got one over on me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that had to do with the hairstyles of the day too. That mid '80s, he almost had like a perm. Like in AWA, it was quite the look. But yeah, a bit of a chameleon in terms of his appearance, and I think that kind of anti-hero swagger that we were just talking about, what a perfect dovetail into this NWO Scott Hall character
Right.
who shows up in jeans and a denim shirt, cut off sleeves, looking just like a tough guy that you'd meet in the parking lot and, you know, maybe get your ass kicked by.
Right.
I think that kind of was one of those things where, you know, it takes a long time, you know, greatness and anything, you know, most things that are great. And I know that I'm using a very bold and blanket statement there, but most things that are great, whether they're an athlete, whether they're musicians, you know, really artists I'm talking about, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes many years to develop the craft and to figure out what the hell you're good at. And that's what it is. I think that Scott Hall finally figured out what the hell he was good at right in that Razor Ramon era. And then by the time he got to WCW, he knew what he was good at, and he had the attitude, the IDGF attitude. I don't give a you know what.
Sure.
Where I think that, you know, there's an old football saying, play with a chip on your shoulder. You know,
Right.
like play like you're angry at everyone else on the field, like they just took something from you. And I think that Scott he was playing with a chip on his shoulder big time in WCW. And I think that I hate to use the word attitude because it's the attitude era, but the attitude that he had of like, okay, Vince, you don't want to pay me the money anymore. You don't want to pay me top guy money that I feel as though I deserve. Well, I'm going to go to WCW and I'm going to make your life as difficult as I can make it. And look, maybe he didn't mean to make it personally difficult for Vince McMahon. I shouldn't say that. But the idea, like, let me rephrase that. I'm going to go and make as much money as I can possibly make then, you know, like,
right.
I think it's really cool that there were probably many wrestlers in the past that had the same conversation with Vince that Razor had towards the end of that Razor run, that Scott had towards the end of the Razor run, which listeners, if you don't know, quick backstory. Basically, Razor Scott Scott as Razor had kind of been to that middle / upper pay range, but
Right.
not at the top of the mountain pay range. And Scott had a conversation with Vince and basically said, "Hey, what do I have to do to get to that top guy money?" And I don't know what Vince said exactly, but it's been paraphrased that Vince basically said, "Well, I don't see you as that guy at this time." You know, maybe he said, maybe someday, maybe he said, not right now. Whatever it was, in a nice roundabout way, Vince said, "You ain't getting that kind of money. You know, keep dreaming," basically.
Right.
And that's when Scott had heard enough and said, "Well, I'm moving on." I think there are probably a lot of wrestlers in the past that have probably had that same conversation with Vince. Like, hey, what do I have to do to make that top guy money? And they've been told, yeah, we just don't really see it right now, but stick with it. And they've probably stuck with it and been miserable because they don't want to turn down the spot. We've heard that a million times. You know, they got this great spot. You know, Razor Ramon at the time was your number 2 baby face in the company, probably.
Yep.
Then suddenly he says, "You know what? I'm tired of being a 4-time Intercontinental Champion. I'm out."
Assistant manager.
Yeah, assistant manager of the company. He's done. He's done being the vice president. So again, just, you know, the kind of intestinal fortitude to have a really good thing going, because I'm sure Razor Ramon days, I don't know, but he was probably making lawyer money, doctor money, then some. You know, I mean, he's doing really well for himself and his family, but he took the gamble and he took the shot on himself that, you know what, there is more money out there for me. There is a bigger opportunity. So he's inspiring. I think we've probably all been in that situation, whether it's a job that we're working, whether it's a relationship that we're in, where we say to ourselves, shit, man, I know I could do better than this. I know there's better out there for me. But this is nice. This is easy. This is being handed to me every week. Let me just stick with this. So I think, again, like, I think the more I think about Scott Hall, the more I'm realizing just how, like, inspirational of a man he was without even maybe realizing it. But, like, you know, that says it right there. Like, don't be complacent. Don't be afraid of the unknown. If you really believe in yourself, gamble on yourself and go out there and see what kind of opportunities are available. And that's what he did, and literally rewrote history, him and Kevin Nash.
Yeah.
You know, rewrote wrestling history on how pro wrestlers are paid and handled and treated like professional athletes moving forward.
With representation from, I believe the gentleman's name is Barry Bloom, who was the legal representation for these guys. And I think before Barry, working with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and I think later on he worked with Hogan and Goldberg, perhaps.
Yeah.
That was like unprecedented.
Yeah, the idea that a wrestler had an agent was literally just unheard of. You know, the only guy maybe could get away with that is Hogan because of obvious reasons. But yeah, inspiration. You know, I think that we can all kind of learn a little something from Scott Hall.
I think he made some excellent points, and I want to go back to the in-ring work. And you know, I was watching, like I said, I was watching that hour-long tribute biography. From my end, you know, I was actually there in attendance on the sad night. I think it was 2010 in Fall River, Massachusetts, where Scott probably had the worst night of his life, at least professionally, which is when he had kind of he was coming fresh from a rehab center and he was booked for a Top Rope promotion show. Just so everyone knows, Scott and Kevin Nash actually worked a Top Rope promotion show years after that happened. So they're all good at this point. But at that particular night, it was a horrible night. Scott was in no condition to appear, but he was there. It was a sold-out venue, 450 seats. Everybody was very excited to see Scott, and we saw a side of the wrestling world that was pretty scary and ugly. And maybe a year or so later, I believe it was after that, I was at a wrestling convention in Connecticut that Just Incredible hosted. And I believe Scott was there and he was doing so much better. So I know that in recent years, he worked with DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, with the DDP Yoga. I think Scott was in part of that Jake the Snake Roberts, the Resurrection of Jake the Snake documentary. And it appeared that Scott worked very hard to get himself back into a good state of mind. He had a son who's wrestling now. I believe his name is Cody Hall. And Scott was on the upside. But what I heard recently, to give him credit, the Dave Meltzer reporting, that perhaps Scott was a victim of the pandemic in a sense that the isolation, social distancing, sequestering at home like everyone was supposed to, that might have been really detrimental to a guy like Scott Hall, who was no longer trying to stay away from the drinking, but wanted to be social. And when you're stuck at home, the temptations might have caught up with him.
Well, listen, I don't think it's fair for any of us, including Dave Meltzer, to speculate on what happened to Scott at the end. I think it's all kind of just guesswork and to be honest with you, borderline disrespectful, because he doesn't know who Scott is. And I get it. The guy needs to sell newsletters and he needs to get people to click and read, and that's his job. I get that. But I'd prefer to spend our time today talking about the positive sides of Scott Hall and, what he did, how he made us feel as kids growing up all the way through our adulthood, and what we can learn from him. It's pretty cool. I watched that, the documentary that you had mentioned, which is basically, it's on the network right now, and it came out a few years ago. And Scott literally says it as Razor Ramon in a promo. He says it's not. He says where I'm from, it's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you get back up. And I think that that's kind of the mantra there. Scott got back up every time he did, and right up until the very end. And that's the positive message. But I do hope that it'd be cool to see his son Cody Hall get a look somewhere. I'd love to see that for him. I mean, from what I understand, I'm pretty sure he's got a similar physique to his father. Good sized guy. And I know that I can see some of your listeners are commenting that he did have a run in New Japan, was a member of the Bullet Club. So that's no joke right there. I mean, he's clearly had some success. Would be cool to see him turn up in WWE or even in NXT.
Well, it would be. And you know, when I think about Scott Hall, as going back to just the wrestler in ring work, David is not a fan of David Meltzer either, David John. So you got some good company there, Tommy. But for me, I actually got the chance to see Scott Hall wrestle live several times. The aforementioned Great American Bash '89. I believe Scott was at the Capitol Center WCW show I went to in June of '89 as an embryo. And moving forth, 1993, a friend of mine, Colin Steele, and I went to the Baltimore Arena to see a WWF show, which is normally where I'd go see the NWA WCW, but we took a rare trip to Baltimore to go see a WWF show. And on that show was Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels defending in a very rare heel versus heel match against none other than Scott Hall as Razor Ramon. And I remember being in the audience thinking, this is interesting. They're doing a double heel match here in WWF, which they normally didn't do at the time. And but the fans were starting to cheer for Razor. And Razor started to work babyface like midway through the match. And now that I look back at that, I'm like, that must have been the right time, that very kind of intricate and unique babyface turn with Scott to go to become a babyface with the upset loss to the 1-2-3 Kid, Sean Waltman. And this was kind of like Scott's tweener stage when he was like still officially a heel, but becoming a babyface. But you're right, Tommy, he was an anti-hero and the crowd was into him. And, about a year and change later, before their WrestleMania 10 classic ladder match, I happened to go to the Capitol Center in Landover, Maryland, and they basically had like a warm-up house show match, ladder match, Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon, same gimmick, the Intercontinental title on the suspended in the air, and they beat the crap out of each other in this ladder match, and that was about a month before the WrestleMania 10 ladder match with the two belts.
Was that the first ladder match you had ever seen?
In person, it had to be. There had been some before, and just to give some, because I like to.
Well, just the reason why I asked that is there's this kind of gray area, fable, horseshit story that a lot of people think that Razor and Shawn had the first ever ladder match ever. And then even some more educated fans know, well, no, that's not really true. The first ladder match ever was between Brett and Shawn, and then Brett stole that, and then Shawn stole it and did it with Razor. But I've heard that that's not even true, and that they had been doing ladder matches, for 30, 40 years prior to that. So quick sidebar. What can you tell us about the history of the ladder match?
I think, I just saw on Twitter, it was like someone had a photo from like Memphis in 1972 of a ladder match. Right. And the first ladder match I remember, Tommy, on the big show was Dusty Rhodes versus Tully Blanchard in a ladder match with like a suitcase full of money suspended instead of a title belt and barbed wire around the ring. So they had a barbed wire ladder match at like the 1985 or 86 Great American Bash between Tully and Dusty.
And listen, I almost love this about pro wrestling, but just another example of like the revisionist history of pro wrestling and how we're just like, oh yeah, that was the first ladder match ever.
But to give them credit, I think what I would even say this as a fan of Dusty and Tully and Brett and all those guys, I think the pay-per-view WrestleMania 10 ladder match does have a special, like that's significant because they took it to another level. I think with the Dusty and Tully thing, I mean, look, it's Dusty Rhodes. He's 302 pounds. And so I think Dusty and Tully, it's like, if anything, use this ladder as a smashing weapon, but really it's just a means to the end of climbing up the thing and getting what's up top. I think for Shawn and Razor, why people love that match and why it still holds up today, I just watched it today, as a matter of fact. It's because they were kind of ahead of their time and they were setting the tone for these ladder matches. That
you could argue that they made the ladder almost like the third man in the ring.
Right.
Like the ladder almost became a character in that match.
Well said. Well said. And when you think about guys like Jeff Hardy, Matt Hardy, Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, that next generation, 5 or 6 years later, that was all because of Shawn and Razor in Madison Square Garden. And also, let's not forget, about a year and 3 months later, they did it again with the not often discussed SummerSlam 95 rematch.
Now that's when there was Shawn hates the fact that he botched the ending, right? He didn't even botch the ending. He grabbed the belt, didn't come down.
I think so. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a botch at the end. It's a great match, like you said. It's an underrated ladder match, but I think that the kind of fart at the end of the match is in the big key high spot. Shawn goes to grab the belt and he just falls. It doesn't come down.
Yeah, good point. And Tommy, I wanted to mention this, and you can expostulate a bit more too. When I was watching some of these Razor Ramon 1993, 1994 matches on that Gorilla Monsoon Stan Lane special, which it's on Peacock, anybody can find it. Just look up Razor Ramon. You get about 2 hours of peak Razor Ramon. He was, the word that came to mind, Tommy, was crisp. This guy, Scott Hall in 93, 94, was so fast for a guy that's 6'7", still probably 270, 275, 265 pounds, whatever he was. But his speed work, I mean, he was just a fast worker.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, man, because I've been feasting on a steady diet of Scott Hall matches in the last week or so myself. And I said to myself last night while I was watching one of his matches, it was actually the famous 1-2-3 Kid match, which is a short match, actually. And that's probably not the best example of this. But I said to myself, shit, man, like, not a lot of people give Scott credit as an athlete. Like, you don't really hear about Scott Hall, the athlete. And the fact that here's a guy who's 6'7", you know, he's billed at 283 pounds, which, you know, they always give it the old WWE jack up. But still, 6'7", 6'6", 250 plus pounds, moving around like a cat. A very nimble guy. You know, almost had the like kind of quickness of like a basketball player would. You know, like reminds me of like a Dennis Rodman type. You know, like that kind of a body. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people give him credit for the in-ring worker. And like Bret Hart, although they're very different in terms of their skill set and their move set in the ring, they both make you feel as though the moves that they put on an opponent could really hurt you. And not in some cartoon way, not in some, I don't want to sound like JR, but, you know, flying through the sky acrobatic way, you know, like really like, oh man, wow, if you did that to someone, that would hurt them. You know, like, for example, the fall away slam.
Oh, yeah.
I would love when Scott Hall would just pick up a guy, nonchalantly kind of like look around for a beat, and then just take out the trash, you know what I mean, over his head. I mean, that, again, like, just a lot of like classic moves that not only do they look cool while he's doing them, but they look like shit, man. I wouldn't want to be thrown over this guy's head and slammed on the mat like that. Also, something kind of unique that I noticed about him, and I'm pretty sure this carried through to the NWO character. Scott Hall would always have one fancy elbow pad and then one just regular black, you know, kind of elbow pad. He only featured one sexy elbow pad. I thought that was kind of cool. I wonder why. Who, like, did he lose one of the elbow pads one day and then just said, fuck it, I'll just go out with one? But like knowing Scott Hall, he's probably like, yeah, Michael Jackson's got one glove, I got one elbow pad. You know, like just, I find that, you know, characters and people, Scott Hall's cool, right? I'm not the first guy to say that. Like, anyone who's ever met him, you've seen it in every documentary. You can't teach cool. He's cool. And he just, again, choosing to only have one elbow pad that's got the Razor logo on it. Just one extra little thing that makes you lean in a little bit more to say, huh, you know, like one extra little nuance. Like, what is that about? Well, that's interesting. Just one elbow pad. You know, it's like just smart, like something so smart and subtle that makes the audience look at you that 1 second longer than they look at the bum across the ring, you know?
God is in the details, they say. You know, some of those matches I was watching, Tommy, was him versus Adam Bomb. And it's like, you know, and I'm not putting down Adam Bomb at all. I think his real name is Brian Clark. But similar size guys, both very athletic, both, you know, ruggedly handsome, dark-haired guys, about the same age or the same generation at least. But like you said, these extra little nuances of cool is why we're, even if Scott didn't pass away, people were still talking about his greatness in wrestling. And with Adam Bomb, not so much, because Scott took it to the next level. Some guys here I want to acknowledge were making a lot of comments about the Tony Montana from Scarface. Obviously, that was Scott Hall, his inspiration for the Razor Ramon character. Apparently, Pat Patterson and Vince McMahon had not seen the movie Scarface. And so Scott, along with his buddy Kurt Hennig, who was still there as Mr. Perfect, were kind of doing their Razor Ramon impersonations for Vince. And Vince fell in love with the character. And that's how they kind of morphed the Diamond Stud and Tony Montana into Razor Ramon, which is a very interesting story. So a lot of cool stuff there. And but I was also watching, you know, we talk about the when he goes over to the NWO and WCW, to me, it's like Scott's physical prowess peaked as Razor Ramon, 93, 94, 95. Even his Royal Rumble match when he put over Goldust title is actually a pretty great match. But when he gets over to WCW, he doesn't really have those classic matches anymore. He kind of gets put in tag teams with Kevin Nash quite a bit. But his mic work, I think, picked up. Like, this was the peak of Scott Hall on the microphone with addressing the crowd at the live Nitros. And, hey, yo, one more for the bad guys, one more for the good guys.
The survey was just such a cool concept.
Right.
You know, the survey was so brilliant because he knew the answer for the most part. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, you know, I think he learned a valuable weapon there, or he learned that the more you do with the mic, the less you have to do with your body.
Right.
And I think that, you know, that's the ultimate psychology of pro wrestling from a traditional heel standpoint, or maybe even you could argue from a babyface, because I mean, you know, not that Hulk Hogan's promos were these like amazing works of art, but they were so energetic and filled with excitement that little kids just went nuts for them. I'm one of them. So it's one of those things. I think like that is the ticket, you know, that you just kind of said a mouthful. It's like once you are as a wrestler able to master the art of the mic work, the in-ring work isn't as important. And I'm not trying to take anything away from what you have to do. I'm sure it's still very difficult to do. But like, to me, the hardest thing that you can do in a wrestling ring is get the attention of the audience with your mouthpiece, with the microphone. Right. You know what I mean? They've been saying it since the beginning of time in the world of wrestling. Like, you got to talk them into the building. You don't wrestle them into the building. Nobody came here to watch a goddamn headlock. No one gives a shit. You can see a headlock in any 8th grade lunchroom after an argument. They came here to see these guys talk and to hear the things that they have to say. And, you know, I think Scott Hall mastered that. And you're right. I mean, hey, yo. Yeah. Wherever has there been 2 words that kind of resonate like they do? You could argue that it's barely 2 words. The 2 are like the shortest words that you can possibly think of. But yet, hey, yo, it's like you say that to any wrestling fan and, you know, you can get chills thinking about, you know, how much impact those 2 little tiny words had, those 5 letters. It's pretty awesome to think about. And not just anybody can do that. And I'm not trying to poke fun at him, and he would kick the shit out of me if he ever saw me. But like Bob Sparkplug Holly couldn't come out and say, hey, yo, and get that. Yeah. You really have to have some kind of connection on another level with the audience to get that over, and Scott did. And also, I mean, what's cooler than you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here.
Right. That was the opening promo when he came into the ring during a WCW Nitro, the first ever 2-hour Nitro, I believe. And Scott Hall emerges from the audience to interrupt a Mike Enos versus Scott Dahl match. And what you just said, you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. That's his opening line. And according to Eric Bischoff, because I've been listening to some Scott Hall tributes this week, and Eric Bischoff basically said that he, meaning Eric, wrote it, and Scott pretty much memorized it word for word and put his own spin on it. And what I was impressed by listening to Eric's story and then going back to the WWE biography, it seemed that Scott was very good with taking instructions from either a Vince McMahon or a Pat Patterson or maybe a Bruce Pritchard and then an Eric Bischoff, taking those directions, instructions, whatever you want to call it, but making it his own. And I think as actors and even the wrestlers, there seems to be a big struggle these days where wrestlers are trying to find their identity or their character's identity, and they're getting the cliche bad creative. But a guy like Scott, who went through the Diamond Stud and came out Razor Ramon, he could have looked at Razor Ramon or the Diamond Stud as bad creative, but instead he made those things his own, fully committed to those characters. Granted, they were cool characters, unlike, say, a Red Rooster or something like that. But Scott made them his own. He delivered the goods. And then when he did have the opportunity to be a little more loose on the mic, as he got into the 97, 98, 99 WCW, he was ready for that as well.
Yeah, I definitely think that, when you think of NWO, New World Order, you think of, this sense of rebellion, and you think of like this sense of these pirates of the pro wrestling world. And I don't think there's a better guy to be on that pirate ship than Scott Hall. I mean, like, think about it. The NWO logo practically is a goddamn pirate logo. It's black and white. It's like a skull and crossbones. It's aggressive. It's edgy. So it's like, sometimes in entertainment, timing is just perfect. And there just wasn't a better time for Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. They're pissed off. They've got something to prove. They want to shake shit up. They've got all the answers, and I don't mean that in a smart-ass way, but you got two guys that have been through the ringer. They've been through the WWE mindset. They've been through the rigmarole of WCW and their bullshit. And they just kind of had it all figured out at that point. Really cool stuff. Really, kind of unique way to. Let's talk about some other revolutionary things they did. I mean, they kind of brought hip hop culture to the forefront, and that whole notion of like the fact that like, they've said it many times, but like, a lot of the whole territorial warfare thing that they were doing was directly ripped from hip hop battles, East Coast, West Coast battles that were happening between like Biggie and Tupac. So just like really unique and cool way to like incorporate what's happening in the world of pop culture with pro wrestling. And I feel like anytime like they were just cooking up this like perfect stew for what the wrestling fan wanted in 1996. And obviously that carried over into 97, 98 and beyond. And to this day, it's just really cool. Longevity is a very difficult thing to achieve in any fast life, particularly in entertainment. Because nowadays our attention spans are, we want everything right now. We want it in 30-second dosages, and we forgot what was cool last year so quickly. So to have any kind of longevity in this day and age, it's special. And when you see the 5-year-old wrestling fans wearing an NWO t-shirt, or the 7-year-old kid who's playing with a Scott Hall action figure that Mattel just made this year, or last year, it shows you the longevity that these guys had and just what the next level that they were on. So, you know, again, Scott Hall's memory will live on forever. And, you know, not that I'm wrapping things up. It's just, it's really cool to see that what they did was so special that it's living on today. And I don't know that it's ever going to die. Like I'll go out on a limb and say that the NWO is going to outlive us all. It's going to outlive us all.
But that T-shirt, that infamous T-shirt, and just some real particular things. But you and I have had a laugh in the past about even Scott Hall could make tucking his T-shirt into his pants with the belt on top look cool. You know what I mean? Like the traditional thing was just to wear your T-shirt outside of your pants, but Scott, on occasion, would tuck his T-shirt into his jeans, and it was just a different look. But he would do stuff like that.
Yeah, just like a small example. Like I think Scott Hall was one of the first guys to take their T-shirt that you can go get at the merch booth and cut it up so that it's like almost in half, so that like
Right.
you remember the cut he would do where like you cut the side of the shirt and you almost just wearing it like a cape practically. So there's like a hole in the center. It drapes on the front and it drapes on the back. Well, guess what? You go to any gym in America today,
Right.
there's 5 guys that have their T-shirt cut like that. You go to any practice field where guys are playing football or whatever, you got half the guys have their T-shirts cut like that. So it's like, again, I'm not saying Scott Hall's the first guy to cut his T-shirt like that, but when he did it, everyone else did it after that. So it's just like a really incredible, revolutionary guy in just so many ways. Just something as simple as how you cut your T-shirt up.
There's a famous, I guess it's a GIF of, is it GIF or GIF? But whatever it is, it's the NWO is in the ring. I think Hogan, Bischoff, Conan, and Scott Hall's in there. And someone in the audience at this, probably a Nitro taping or a pay-per-view taping, throws a soda into the ring. And it hits Scott, basically ricochets off his hair, like off his head. And a puddle of soda gets in his hair. And what does Scott Hall do? He starts combing back his hair with the soda that someone just threw at him. And, and it's he doesn't miss a beat. He doesn't sell the fact, hey, some stupid fan just threw something in the ring. He literally, in a split second, turns a negative into a positive and looks cooler because of it. And not many people could pull that off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think little subtle things like, I mean, who didn't love Scott's spooky fingers?
Oh, yeah.
You know, again, something so little that like we do, like if you're playing with like a little kid, you know, ooh, scary.
Right.
But when it was just so cool. And it, again, it was arrogant. It was fucking arrogant to be doing spooky fingers at someone. It was basically saying, like, I'm not afraid of you at all. I think of you like a child would think of something on TV, you know, that's supposed to scare them. So just like really cool stuff. Somebody's chiming in about the toothpick.
Yeah, Laurence, who's got a pro wrestling group on Facebook, good guy. Laurence from Australia is an actor as well, and Laurence Laza Johnson with Laurence's pro wrestling group and his mixed martial arts fighting group on Facebook. There, he's a big wrestling enthusiast.
The toothpick was really cool, and you know, again, it was just like all these tiny, subtle things that kind of made up Scott. And the toothpick is actually what got them in a little trouble too, because when all this legal nonsense that went on, when Vince finally said to himself, wait a minute, these motherfuckers are just Diesel and Razor, just with different names. I'm suing them. The toothpick was actually one of the things that kind of was part of the case. They were like, look, he's got the same accent. He's got the same haircut. He carries a toothpick to the ring. That was kind of like one of those things where, like, who knows, had he nixed the toothpick for Scott Hall, maybe that wouldn't have been as easy of a case to make. That they were
but the Diamond Stud used the toothpick before, though. That's the problem with that. The accent, though, was strictly Razor Ramon. The accent was a Razor thing, but the toothpick, the story goes that Scott and DDP were both supposed to have the toothpicks as a tag team, but DDP dropped his toothpick. So then Scott was the only one with the toothpick left. So that became his gimmick as Diamond Stud. But you're right. And that whole legality thing you're talking about, which he actually introduced probably for the first time in North America wrestling, substitute wrestlers or scabs. You had a scab Diesel, Glenn Jacobs, and you had a scab Razor Ramon. Unfortunately, that guy, who I think his name was Rick Bogner, he passed away about 5 years ago as well. But there actually was a couple of guys who wrestled as Razor Ramon and Diesel for about 6 or 7 months in WWF in 96, 97. And unfortunately for them, it just was so befuddling for the fans that you've got a non-Kevin Nash Diesel and a non-Scott Hall Razor Ramon, taking up space on your TV set. And
it's amazing. Not to cut you off, but it's amazing to think that at least one of those guys bounced back. I mean, became Kane, obviously. Glenn Jacobs went on to become Kane, but like, what an awful gimmick to get strapped with. Can you imagine? Like, hey, you're going to play. It's almost like, and they don't even do this on television shows anymore, but remember on TV sitcoms of the 80s and 90s, like, we're replacing Mom with a new actor this season, and like a new actor comes in and fills their spot. It's never the same. It's always like
new Aunt Viv.
The new Aunt Viv or whatever. So
right.
I don't know, man. That was a weird piece of creative. I could see having them come out one time doing like a squash match and having them both get their asses kicked and then like, okay, the joke's over. But like, to intelligently think that we can just recreate these characters and slap new guys on them. I mean, WWE's had some misses in their past. That's probably one of the biggest ones.
It was a spiteful move, basically, to try and help their legal battles. But I want to just quickly, a couple of minutes we have left, Tommy, talk about the fact that before all of this that we talked about, Diamond Stud, Scott had actually done, he came into wrestling in 1984. He tells a couple of different stories about basically going to Florida at age 17 and going to different gyms until he found the wrestlers. And in one story, he says he found Kevin Sullivan, and Sullivan was impressed by the amount of squats he was doing. And Sullivan put the word in for him for the Florida wrestling office. And then Scott tells another story about seeing Barry Windham in a Publix, which is a big supermarket chain down here. And Barry Windham put a word in for him. And Scott was such a big kid, even at 17 or 18 years old. So he kind of got jump-started. Dusty Rhodes got him into Florida wrestling. Apparently, Scott's first feud was against Dusty Rhodes in Florida. But then he got repackaged for the first of many repackagings. He was in a tag team with Danny Spivey. They were called the American Starship, Eagle and Coyote. Scott was Coyote. They were a babyface, undercard tag team that were just learning their trade. Before they could really do anything one way or the other, they got split up, and Scott went over to the AWA, where he became Big Scott Hall, and for a brief period of time, he was known as Magnum Scott Hall, which was kind of a weird thing because you already had Magnum TA in wrestling. As I mentioned, Scott and Kurt Hennig were a really popular babyface tag team, and I think Scott was even getting AWA world title shots against Stan Hansen at that time. Like I said, those Remco action figures of the AWA, I think there was a Hennig and Scott Hall, a couple of figures. Then we talk about the whole thing with Diamond Stud. He went to Puerto Rico and wrestled a few times. I think he did a few tours of Japan. But after all the WCW days were over, he did have a brief comeback with the NWO over in WWE. And probably the biggest match, two matches stick out. There was one on Raw. The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall in a 2-on-3 handicap match on Raw. And then at WrestleMania 18, you had Steve Austin versus Razor Ramon, or Scott Hall, I should say. Tommy, any thoughts on when the NWO came over to the WWF in that 2002-2003 era? Were you still watching at that time?
You know, we often have them as wrestling fans, and that was during one of my dark times. You know, that was a stretch of there was probably about a good 3 year stretch right after the Attitude Era where I didn't really pick up wrestling again until I would say like the midst of the John Cena boom. So that was during my dark times. But from what I hear about it, it was kind of short lived, and it just unfortunately, it was chasing the dragon, if you will, and just unfortunately, like trying to, as they say, you've lost that love and feeling. It just didn't have what it once had. But I will say this: I do have a late in the game great memory of. Geez, the years go by so fast now. This memory is probably 7 or 8 years old now. But my last memory of Scott Hall in the ring was the WrestleMania that Sting had come back. I believe it was 2014.
2014, Sting versus Hunter.
And yeah, and there was this really great smage at the end, or smage. Am I using that word right? Sorry.
I think you are, yeah.
There's this really great kind of battle between the NWO. It was basically, Hogan, Nash, and Hall, and Waltman, and Degeneration X. Right. Or which side was Waltman on? I think
Waltman was on the NWO side, and the DX side was the New Age Outlaws, Shawn Michaels. Yeah, you got it.
Which is weird because Waltman actually represents both of those factions.
Yeah.
But and I think he's actually in the Hall of Fame with both factions. Or maybe not. I could be wrong. But point is, that was the last time I remember, and I'm glad that I have that memory of Scott Hall strutting down the ring with his boys. NWO versus DX. And again, fantasy booking. What if, we as wrestling fans, we love to think of like who would win in a match, this guy versus that guy, in situations that would never happen. So we love to see that, and it was cool to see that happened at whatever WrestleMania that was back in 2014.
Well, that was the one where I watched that with you, as a matter of fact, because that was the one where Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns title match at the end got Seth Rollins at the end of that one. And that was also the WWF debut of Ronda Rousey came out during the Rock
and that's when Sting, I believe, was that when Sting got injured by...
No, that was late. Sting
that was later.
So that was at Survivor Series that year, the Buckle Bomb.
Right. Versus Rollins. We're getting off the beaten path.
No, but I mean, great memory, Tommy. And I do want to, I'll share with my last Scott Hall memory from the ring. And then I do want to talk about the TNA thing real quick. I saw Scott. This was a big time wrestling promotions match at a baseball stadium. I want to say the summer of 2011 or 2012. But basically, Just Incredible defended the big time wrestling championship against somebody. And at the end, there was two run-ins. The first one was from Scott Hall, and the second one was from Terry Funk. So you had these two unadvertised run-ins at this baseball stadium showcase. Just Incredible variation of the NWO music, the Wolfpack theme probably, and then Terry Funk comes out. So I mean, it was just a lot of fun, and promotions like that we enjoyed up in New England, big time promotions, top rope promotions. They always seem to feature the heroes and the legends. Let's see. I did want to mention that Scott Hall was a part of the first ever TNA pay-per-view in the summer of 2022. I think it's in June of 2022, but they had that first ever gauntlet.
Wait, that can't be right.
I'm sorry, 2002.
2002. Yeah, see, and that was like the start of my dead period for wrestling. I missed the whole beginning of the TNA era. I remember watching it from afar. I remember saying like, what? Who's Hogan wrestling for now? And who's, what's going on? But I do remember seeing it from afar, and I remember thinking again from miles away, so to speak, just thinking like, oh, is this like Diet Coke WCW? Like, did they basically get all the guys who wouldn't sign for WCW? You know, who basically in my mind, it was all the guys that were loyal, WCW loyalists that didn't want to join the WWE. That's the way it looked like to me from an outside perspective.
And there's some truth to that, but you had guys who kind of sprinkled on top like a Ken Shamrock and like a Scott Hall. And Scott was actually kind of a big part of the legitimacy of the early TNA. And the reason why is because they were coming off that the infamous plane ride from hell. Scott was no longer with the WWF, and so he was open to new bookings, and he and Jeff Jarrett. I mean, we didn't even talk, Tommy, about all the Intercontinental title matches that Razor Ramon had. I mean, against Jeff Jarrett, Goldust, Shawn Michaels. Yep, Diesel. I mean, he had some great matches. I think, didn't Chuck Norris once help Razor Ramon beat Diesel in Chicago at SummerSlam 94 or something for the title? Just so many crazy things.
He might have kicked Jeff Jarrett in the face, I think. I think it was Jeff Jarrett that got kicked in the face. But, yeah, I mean, there's so much. Not to cut you off, but like, there's just so much. You could literally talk for hours and hours about Scott Hall, and it's one of those things, like you just said, like you like forget more than you can even talk about because he did so much.
Exactly, and even the ECW cameo. You know, in the middle of the Monday Night Wars, it was like what 98 or 99, and Tommy, I didn't even know about this until watching the ECW special or whatever it was on the network, but Scott Hall made basically like an unadvertised cameo at an ECW show while under contract to WCW. So, I mean,
that I didn't know.
Yeah, he actually put over a guy, 300-pound guy for ECW who was okay. And then he beat Just Incredible in a non-title match at the end of the show. So he actually took a night off from WCW where he's under contract and just shows up in ECW as a favor to Paul Heyman because he knew that ECW was struggling and they needed some shots in the arm. That's Scott looking out for the business as a whole, not just his own paycheck or what he was doing. So, God, Tommy, just one last thing is that you heard this one when Diesel was doing Kevin Nash's Diesel was doing leapfrogs, and Scott said, "Don't do the leapfrog." He said, "Why not?" He said, "You're 7 feet tall. You shouldn't be doing a leapfrog." So, because what the psychology was, you're doing this to impress people, the leapfrog. But a 7 foot tall, 325 man should not be avoiding contact with anybody.
Yeah, you should run him over like a truck. Your name is Diesel. You should be trucking people.
Right. And so the idea was Scott telling Kevin Nash, "You're a big man. Wrestle like a big man. Don't wrestle like a junior heavyweight. There's no need for that."
Yeah, I heard something really cool. I'll finish off with this before our closing thoughts. But I heard something cool listening to My World with Jeff Jarrett. Shout out to Jeff Jarrett and Conrad Thompson. Great podcast. And Scott told Waltman and would often say, "Listen, when you're in an enhancement match, you're going to want to go in there and just blow through your moveset and squash a guy in a minute. Don't go in there." Grab a hold, do a headlock. While you have the guy in a headlock, the commentator is going to put you over and talk about you and your character. So, like, the notion being, yeah, you do want to go in there and kick the shit out of the guy, but don't kick the shit out of him so quickly that you don't allow time for the commentator to put you over and talk about, oh, this guy's oozing with machismo and he's a real bad dude. And those are all things that can be said while you got a guy in a headlock. If you're just going through and running through your opponent, the commentator has no time to say anything unique and cool about you. And that's really, especially at the time, that's all the audience had back then. They didn't have a profile online that they could look up. They had what was printed in magazines and what the nice catch I just did there. They had what was printed in magazines and what the commentators said during your match. That's the only information we had about you. So cool little factoid there about Scott Hall teaching the young guys to take their fucking time in the ring. It's your time. The whole world's looking at you. Now's not the time to be rushing.
I want to get to some of your stuff, Tommy, and I just want to give quick suggestions for anyone that is wondering. Hey, Mike. Hey, Tommy. What Scott Hall matches should I watch? Off the top of my head, everybody, I'm going to recommend Scott Hall versus Jeff Jarrett. I believe at Royal Rumble '95.
I was going to say that one.
You want to take the next one? Go ahead.
No, that's fine. You go ahead.
Royal Rumble '96, Goldust versus Razor Ramon. I want to say, going over to WCW, and maybe this will be my last suggestion, but Hall and Nash, I believe it was versus Harlem Heat at Sturgis at Road Wild '96. I think it was. I know they wrestled the Steiners, but I think that Hall and Nash actually wrestled Harlem Heat first. And Tommy, as you're getting yourself collected, I did want to put over that you were speaking of magazines. You have a great quote. I believe is it Glamour magazine on the this current edition of Glamour magazine?
The UK edition to specify. Edition?
Okay, but it's about, you've got some nice quotes about your actress. When I say your actress, because you directed her. Megan Fox, the gorgeous, glamorous, iconic, even Megan Fox in this Johnny and Clyde film, which is a modern day take on the infamous Bonnie and Clyde story. And you want to mention anything more about your film, Johnny and Clyde, coming soon to theaters near you?
Yes, that's right. Everything Mike says is true. I have a film called Johnny and Clyde, which is starring Megan Fox, and it's a Megan Fox like you've never seen her before. She has a very unique appearance in this movie. I don't want to give away too much, but everyone traditionally, when they think of Megan Fox, they think of her dark hair, brunette, usually coming out with that dark hair. We have a different look for her. I'm not going to say anything else, but it has to do with her hair. It's a different look. It's another flavor that we're trying. We're very happy with the results, and we can't wait to show that movie off later this fall. Also, I've got a YouTube channel that I've been pushing really hard. It's just you can just type in Tom DeNucci, DENUCCI, right into your YouTube machine, and you'll find my channel. I do a lot of behind-the-scenes content with films and the movies that I'm working on. I just did a mini series on a lot of the basically like a daily behind the scenes vlog of a film that I just finished called Merry Xmas. And there's plenty more where that came from. So please find me on YouTube, find me on Instagram at Tom DeNucci across the board. I'm on Twitter too. My name is right there. See it? Tom DeNucci.
And you've got, for guys, and I know a lot of the wrestling fans always looking to get into physical shape themselves. So you've got some weightlifting advice on your channel. You've got some diet advice, I believe, and some fun behind the scenes stuff. BTS, as our friend David Gear says, of life as an actor and a filmmaker, and just doing some cool things. And also, if people want to see Tommy's backlog of work, I would nominate Almost Mercy, which is a really cool film, a dark film with some great Rhode Island stuff going on. That has some wrestlers in it. Our buddy Will DeCoff and Mike Bennett, a.k.a. Mike Kanellis, is in that one. And then you've got Vault, which is a great one. And I believe a former TNA wrestler is in a fight scene at the prison yard in that one. So you definitely have some...
And
wrestler.
Apollo, our boy Apollo.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh,
he was in TNA. He was in the early TNA.
I'm sorry, I thought you said our former ECW, and because Just Incredible's also in that fight scene.
Yes, Just Incredible.
So, yeah. Every movie, like Mike said, every movie I make, I try to find something for a pro wrestler in there because I just like working with them, and they're stuntmen. They're just natural born stuntmen. So thanks for listening. And as far as my favorite match, one to check out, I got a couple. I was watching the other day, particularly because I'm from Rhode Island. The 1994 Royal Rumble was hosted at the Providence Civic Center, and it was fun to watch that the other day. And you wouldn't think that I'd put an Irvin R. Shyster match on this list,
Right.
but Razor Ramon and IRS have a really just like classic worker match. It's a really great match. I suggest you check it out. And the one unique thing that I want you to check out, above all of the in-ring action, watch the fucking pop Razor Ramon gets when he walks out. This fucking building goes berserk. And I've been to the Providence Civic Center many times. It's not a big building. It maybe seats maxed out, I don't know, 7,000 people. Yeah,
yes.
maybe 15,000. You're right, with the whole floor. But it's not one of these massive fucking buildings at all.
No.
And this place goes insane for Razor Ramon when they call his name. And I remember I said to myself, I was like, God damn, like, is that guy over right there? So watch the 1994 Royal Rumble just for the pop that he gets when he's walking out to the ring to face IRS. It's worth it. It's a little indication of like, wow, this guy's over right now. Like, let's put it this way. At the time, Bret Hart was the WWE champion, and Bret is my guy. I loved him as a kid, so don't take this the wrong way. But I bet you that night in particular, I guarantee you that the Razor pop was bigger than the Bret pop. Guarantee you. Razor was getting more attention and action with that crowd than the fucking Hitman. He really was. Maybe it's a Northeast thing. We got a lot of natural gangsters in Rhode Island. Maybe we just like the bad guy. But they popped for him that night. And another match, just to wrap it up, is, how about just the way that he came in at WrestleMania with, a tag team with Ric Flair? I mean, that's a pretty big deal in itself.
I think it was Survivor Series 92 against...
Survivor Series, my bad.
Yeah, Curt Hennig and Macho Man, and Curt Hennig was substituting for Ultimate Warrior, who was gone. But you're right, and they elevated... Razor Ramon came in on top, which was a far cry from the mid-card maniac that the Diamond Stud was. So credit to Vince and Pat.
Right. And, Yeah, they that's kind of what I was getting at, and I messed up the event. But yeah, the fact that when Vince got a hold of him, he saw money. He said, "Whoa, this handsome 6'7" athletic motherfucker is gonna be a top guy right away." So I think that was cool. And I'd like to close with this. One last thought on what usually makes a unique wrestler is, obviously the mic work, obviously the in-ring work, but you got to have an iconic finisher. And I think that the Razor's Edge was very hardcore, very kind of in your face. It was a powerful looking move, and it was the kind of move that like looks like it would cripple somebody. You know what I mean? Like the idea that you're dropping them on their back of their head from that crazy angle, and you're almost like in this weird like crucifixion position right off the bat. It's just a badass move. And again, shows you how strong the guy was. I'm sure it's not easy to hoist a grown man up over your head like that, let alone a grown man that's, wrestler sized. And I got to say, like over the years, I don't remember a lot of guys that Razor couldn't get in the Razor's Edge. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times with these power moves, there's that age-old question. It's like, yeah, but you can't do it to everybody. I mean, yeah, he wasn't given the Razor's Edge to Yokozuna, but like, I don't remember him having a problem with too many people. And just, again, awesome move. I don't know that he invented it, Mike. To your knowledge, do you know anybody who did a similar move to that prior? I mean, I'm sure he's not the first guy to do it, but certainly put it on the map.
Well, the fall-away slam, I think I remember Scott Steiner doing a variation on that for a while. And then the Razor's Edge, I think that kind of was a Scott Hall thing, because the only thing that, oddly enough, Kevin Nash did something somewhat similar, which had like a spin. It's actually pretty sick. Yeah. Oz would like spin the guy in the air.
And then drop him.
which seemed really dangerous. Like you're just doing a free float with a 220 or 250 pound opponent is like floating in the air for a 6 foot drop. It didn't seem very safe.
So,
But
to your knowledge, Razor Ramon invented the Razor's Edge.
to my knowledge, he did, because
Did Diamond Stud do that move?
I think Diamond Stud did do it, and they called it like the Diamond Cutter or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
Before the DDP Diamond Cutter, they called it like the Diamond Mind or something. And the cool thing about Razor's finisher is although it looked cool, but you could also tell it was not going to kill anybody, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like it was enough to knock the wind out of you, but it's not going to break your neck.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all comes down to the guys doing it. I mean, I think it's I certainly think there's an element of danger involved anytime you got a guy who's landing on this part of the back. You know,
Right.
that's where you take it, you know. So I mean, obviously it could have went wrong if Scott Hall slipped at any point, it could be good night, ladies. So really cool move, revolutionary stuff. And a move that you don't see too much, you know, in tribute. Like, you know, for example, like Kevin Owens does the stunner. I'm not seeing a lot of guys do the Razor's Edge these days.
After he passed away, a guy, the U.S. champion Damian Priest, had won on Finn Balor on Raw as a tribute. And to give the guys in WWE these days some respect, Kevin Owens said, "Hey, yo, over in AEW, Dr. Britt Baker wore like some Scott Hall colors when she defended her title in a cage match against Thunder Rosa." So the whole wrestling world, Tommy, really did kind of mourn this one. And I think it was you that said it might have been the biggest loss felt in wrestling since Randy Savage passed away.
Yeah, I think so, but 100%.
Yeah. And I mean, the only thing that I can think of in the meantime would be, but for a totally different feeling, was Brody Lee, John Huber, I believe his name was, who wrestled as Brody
Sure.
Lee and Luke Harper. It was been a tough couple of weeks for wrestling. JJ McGuire, who did music with Jimmy Hart for the WWF and the Gentrys, passed away. Big E got a broken neck. I don't want to say he broke his neck, but he got a broken neck in a match on SmackDown. And at times like this, when you see the wrestling community kind of pull together, even as we did here in our own small way with the Scott Hall tribute, it does make you proud to be a wrestling fan, because there's a lot of good people who both watch wrestling, who engage in it. And a guy like Scott Hall, I think you made some great points today, Tommy, in his own way, with the negotiations for his contract, with seeing himself as a main event guy, not a secondary guy, the determination. You've shared that cartoon with me that you like, which is like the two guys are in the coal mine digging for coal or something, and one guy takes off with his little axe pick, and then the other guy hits gold right after the other guy leaves. So Scott Hall was always digging, man. And
Scott Hall stuck it out, and he swung that pickaxe a few more times, and he struck that gold.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up, buddy. If you have any final words, go right ahead, and then we'll call it a day. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say thanks for having me on the show. I love pro wrestling. I love talking about pro wrestling. And like you said, we all have this kind of almost secret handshake society, wink, wink, clandestine connection as wrestling fans. Whereas, you know, if I'm in a group of people that I don't know and I see a guy wearing a wrestling T-shirt, I know that he most likely speaks my language, and that makes me feel good. So we love that about wrestling. We love that it brings us together. And in these tough times, it's really nice to kind of just, the best way to grieve is sometimes just to talk about the person that you lost and why they meant something to you. And I think it's very evident that Scott Hall meant a whole lot to a whole lot of people, and we're going to miss him. So thanks for having me on the show. Thanks for letting me kind of process losing one of my favorite wrestlers as a kid growing up.
Two-time WWF Hall of Famer, as both an individual as Razor Ramon, as part of the New World Order. And Scott Hall is I believe, a 4-time Intercontinental Champion for WWF, multiple-time WCW Tag Team Champion, AWA World Tag Team Champion.
Tag Team Champion in WWF too, right? With 1, 2, 3 Kid.
I don't remember, to be honest with you. I know the Kid had it with Jannetty, and the Kid had it with Holly and Jannetty. I don't know if he had it with Razor, to be honest.
All right, we're gonna cut that from the show. Cut that last part.
But I think, as you said, inspirational leader of the Clique, founding member really of the NWO, the New World Order. Probably got the best match out of Bill Goldberg. I kept wanting to say that, but I think it was sold out 98. That Razor probably got Bill Goldberg's best match out of him ever at that time. And just a hell of a talent, and a guy who overcame some situations to make a name for himself, and made his mark. That'll leave a mark, as they used to say in WCW. So Scott Hall, we appreciate your career, and Tommy, I thank you for being here with me today. And I couldn't think of a better guy to bring some interesting insights, perspectives, and memories to the legend that is Scott Hall.
I appreciate that, Mike, and I'm happy to come back and chat wrestling with you sometime. We'll catch you later, brother.
Good night. We'll see you at the matches.
Bye-bye.